the elderly in the future. Now, we say that also for economic reasons. If the elderly population will increase without any kind of balance with the new generation, we are sure that the public debt, the inflation, and the deficit will increase. It means that the Maastricht criteria will collapse. We have to act in order not too much to have more assistance, more wealth, more assistance vis-à-vis somebody, but we need to put away all the obstacles that now the families are living in order to take their responsibility. And for these reasons, and for these economic reasons, we very much support any European policy departing from the new generation, the Next Generation EU fund, which can include also family policies in order to increase the demographic trend. Because any economic policy which does not include a provisional of increase of demographic trend cannot be efficient. That's why we hope also through this, through our friends, through our friends, to discuss on the best way to make concrete proposal to the European Commission, to the European institutions, in order to convince them that demographic policies are not only social policies, but are also economic policies, because if we increase, we do in such a way that the demographic winter, the demographic trend will be increased, we are not doing just public expenditure, but we are thinking about economic investment, and economic investment aimed at a sustainable development. Thank you very much for your participation to this webinar. I'm very curious to know your opinion on this fact, and I hope that together we can also try to change this paradigm, putting in the middle of the current political issues, the demography, which is the start point in order to imagine a future of Europe based on the wellness of the citizens, and not only on the production of goods and services. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vincenzo. For those who are been connecting in these last minutes, our President Vincenzo Bassi has just given his opening address, and I will go forward, giving the floor now to Marco Vidakusic, who is the coordinator of the Employment and Social Policy Team at the Permanent Representation of Croatia to the European Union. As you know, the semester of the Croatian presidency of the Council of the European Union is coming to an end during these days, and we are very happy to see at the end which lessons we can learn, and which are the main messages of the Croatian presidency on this issue of the demographic challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicola. Dear Mr. Bassi, dear Ms. Hirschen, dear MEPs, members of the European Parliament, Ressler and Zolo, dear Mr. Collin, dear participants, good afternoon to everyone. It's my honor to participate in today's conference and represent the most extraordinary presidency, council presidency yet. As an additional shock and added difficulty for our first ever presidency, amidst the pandemic, Croatia's capital Zagreb was hit by a severe earthquake in March. I will try give today you overview of demography in light of a recovery package, as well as council conclusions we adopted on demographic challenges the way ahead. An additional shock and added difficulty was earthquake I already mentioned. Faced with our outbreak of the virus, we were all confronted with the same challenge: to save our citizens' lives, but also their livelihoods that remain our main task. Equally important to deal successfully with socioeconomic consequences of this crisis, with the paramount goal of relaunching growth and employment. Therefore, today's webinar comes at an important moment with well-chosen and highly relevant topic. The Commission's proposed recovery plan and modified multi-annual financial framework come at the right moment and carry particular significance today. Croatia strongly welcomes the recovery plan and its effort to get Europe back on track with respect to sustainable growth and prosperity, as well as transformation to a green and digital economy. This requires strengthening of upward convergence of our economies and addressing a range of challenges, such as demographic change. The agreement on both multi-annual financial framework and recovery plan needs to be reached quickly. The transition to the digital and green economy, as well as restoring economic growth, must be conducted in just and fair manner. All member states have to be included within the process of recovery, where demographic revitalization should play an important role. The recovery itself must be based on the principles of European Pillar of Social Rights as the key instrument for ensuring a social, just and inclusive transition and recovery. In this regard, the link between demographic structures and the impact of recovery potentials has been sharply exposed. Older generations have been among the most vulnerable, hence regions with the aging population will now be more sensitive than ever. Each member state's economic and demographic structures will be a factor in its ability to recover. Moreover, we should not forget that even before the COVID-19 pandemic struck, we were already amid in digital and green transition. This is the opportunity to harness the available funds and to invest in our society, families, as well as to digital and green skills and jobs. To achieve this, still current Croatian presidency of the Council of European Union set political framework on the EU level, which will ensure that regions lagging behind and facing with negative demographic trends, this framework will give opportunity these regions to become more vibrant and attractive using national and European funds as well. More concretely, on behalf of Croatian Prime Minister Mr. Andrej Plenković, in the strategic agenda 2019-2024, we have first time in the history of EU addressed demographic challenges. After last year's general elections on European level, we have now Vice President of the Commission, Dubravka Šuica, responsible for democracy and demography. Croatian presidency said demography as overarching priority during this 6-month period, because only between 2023 and 2060, one of reason is because 2023, 2060, the labor force age between 20 and 64 is projected to decline approximately for 19 million. This shrinking working age population is expected to provide the means for pensions and healthcare services for the rapidly growing cohort of pensioners, challenging the sustainability and adequacy of pensions and health systems and structure of the population of Europe. We noted that all member states are facing with some kind of demographic change: urban-rural divide, aging of the population, depopulation, lack of transport connections, especially in rural areas, housing issues, lack of job and education opportunities, the provision of accessible and affordable high quality childcare and long-term care services, not proper tax reduction for family with more children, lack of flexible working arrangements, legislation for especially for women with more children, brain drain in some regions, brain gain for the others, brain regain, brain circulation, and population decline in general. This is why Croatian presidency proposed in the beginning of the March text of the Council conclusions on the demographic challenges the way ahead. The presidency launched 3 rounds of the consultations, and the Council adopted at the beginning of the June the first Council conclusions on demography in its history, supported by all 27 member states. Now, let me share with you a few messages from Council conclusions adopted at the beginning of the June with aim to achieve a family-friendly environment. A sustainable development and inclusive economic growth require human capital and new innovative solutions. Demographic renewal need to be supported in all member states and should have the same priority as climate neutrality and digitalization at EU level. It should be anticipated and reflected in all future Commission's initiatives in a horizontal manner. Recognizing the importance and the priority to be given to demographic renewal, this could be seen as milestone in EU approach to demographic policies. Now let me share with you a few more messages from Council conclusions. Raising children is a long-term endeavor, and in order for demographic policies to be effective, they must be reliable and enduring. Investment in affordable and high-quality early childhood education and care can contribute to demographic renewal and have significant positive outcome, in particular for socioeconomically disadvantaged children, helping to make the future labor force more resilient in the face of demographic challenges, as well as to achieve better social outcome across the life cycle. We are encouraging investment in the children as the form of social investment that pays the highest return in the future. Promote and emphasize adequate coordinated policies that provide different kind of financial and other support for the families. Public policy should be designed in order to create the conditions inter alia environment enabling families to have the children they wish and to enjoy a better quality of life, life in safety, achieving balance between work, family, and caring responsibilities. In designing demographic policies, cross-sectorial coordination and cooperation between social, family, health, etc. We also invited the European Commission to develop a common basis in interactive EU-wide resource for obtaining data, ensure that all policy proposals and initiatives from side of the Commission are accompanied by comprehensive demographic and territorial impact assessment with the objective of making regions lagging behind more vibrant. Last but not least, we as well invited the European Commission to ensure that investment through European funds make a tangible contribution to addressing demographic challenges at national or regional level, taking into account intra-EU mobility by identifying specific action, mitigating the most acute impacts of demographic trends, and creating the means for sharing best practices so that relevant stakeholders can learn each from others' experience. So this is all from my side. I'm grateful for opportunity to hear your thoughts and discuss our future actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marco, for your intervention. It's a real. It was a very good overview of what has been happening on the demographic issues on this really challenging presidency. As you said, it was not easy to manage, but we really very happy, and we really want to highlight all these efforts in putting the demographic challenges high on the European agenda. Thank you. I will give the floor now to Deja Shesen, who from the cabinet of Vice President Dubravka Šuica, and we have been speaking about the importance of this impact report from the European Commission, long awaited, which was postponed due to the COVID crisis, but it gives really an overview of what's happening on these demographic changes in the European Union. So thank you very much, Deja, for giving your availability. I know that the agenda is not always so easy, and we are really happy to hear your presentation, hoping that you will be able to present. Thank you.
Many thanks, Nicola. Thank you very much for this invitation. Although I think we are all used by now to have most of our interventions.
The micro is switched.
Yeah. Do you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, super. So what I was saying is that although we are all used by now to have most of our interventions remotely, it remains very particular for me to make a presentation without really seeing the participants. And because you usually adapt the way you are presenting something to the audience and to the receptiveness and to the interest that you can sense in the room. While here I can just see the screen and those little icons. So it's very difficult to say if I'm actually responding to the expectations. And this is the reason why, more than the presentation itself, what I'm actually looking forward is to your comments and to the possible discussion that we may have even beyond this particular webinar. So we're always very open to exchange views, to hear your comments. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I could sense a little bit of disappointment in the introduction by Mr. Bassi. And I really hope that after this presentation, he won't be as disappointed as he seemed to be in the beginning, because I'll try to explain what the nature of this report is and what this report is not. And I really hope that you will actually find what you are looking for in the subsequent strands of work that are actually coming out of this report, because this report is really the starting point, and it's not at all it is not at all the conclusion, but it's really the launch pad, the starting point. So if you agree, I will actually share I will actually switch on the screen the presentation so that you have a little bit of a visual background for it. So here it is. So I hope it's coming. Do you have it now?
Not. I cannot see it.
Okay, so now it's just that I was trying. Can you give me back the presenter mode?
Yes.
Okay, so normally now it should be okay. So I think now you should have it.
Perfect.
So what I will do is I will use on the slides the infographics which are accompanying the report, so that you have an idea, in case you have not seen them, of the graphical side of the report. Because in parallel with the publication of the text, we have launched the website, which we try to do as user-friendly as possible, and which we will also use as a platform for the upcoming consultations and reflections in relation to the subsequent policy initiatives. So the report, as you have seen it, if you had the opportunity to read it, is structured in two parts. And the first is about listing the different demographic trends. And the second is about anticipating the impact of those trends on the European Union. So I'll present these two main parts with the next two slides. But what I thought would be also interesting for you to know is the fact that in addition to the website that I have already mentioned in the beginning, and that will hopefully become a genuine repository of the intelligence we have on demography in the EU, is that the report is also accompanied by 27 statistical country fishes, And I'll show you an example of on the next slide. What is also important for you to know is that the report, as you will have seen it, is fully embedded in the twin transitions. And I hope that we manage to demonstrate how much the demographic change actually affects or accelerates both the green and the digital transition. So it is obviously also embedded in the global context of the European Union becoming comparatively smaller and economically potentially less powerful unless we do something. So this is what the report is, but now what the report is not, and this is actually very important in light of what Mr. Bassi said in the very beginning. The report is absolutely not drawing any operational conclusions. On the contrary, it's actually opening avenues for reflection. And I'm very happy to hear that what we want to trigger with this report are reflections on very different areas. On your side, it will be on families, on children. On other side, it would be on the aging population. But and this is what I want to say, is what is important with this report is not the text that we have presented last week, but it's the next steps, meaning the green paper, meaning the long-term vision, but also meaning the children's strategy, the child guarantee, the gender strategy. And the last week's publication was also particularly timely in the context of the Council conclusions, which happened in the same week on demography, and in which the Council, as Marco explained just before me, and the 27 member states called the Commission to deliver on many areas in relation to demography. So I hope that with this report, we are already bringing some first answers in how we are planning to address this Council invitation. So I'll switch on the next slide. And this slide, it's actually, yeah, so this slide is just an example of the statistical country fish. So it is exactly the same fish for all the 27 countries. And you can find all of them on our website. So there's no narrative, it's just figures. But what is actually important to say is that we're bringing here statistics on the member state level. But the interesting part of the report is actually not this dynamic between the member states, but actually the one on the regional and the sub-regional level. And this is the reason why we have a whole section in the report on the regional and the local dimension. So now I quickly pass, you'll see the presentation is very short. It's only five slides. So I'm already on the third one. So now about the trends or the drivers of the demographic change. And I'll go very quickly through it. And the reason why I will do that is because the analysis of trends has not been our main focus. It was just the point of departure. And what I wanted to highlight here, especially in light of the presentation that was due to take place, I think, as well today in your webinar on the report under preparation in the European Parliament, for which the title is something like reversing the trends, or I don't remember anymore, but you'll know better, is that what we do in our report is that we are only observing the trends, at least at the level of this report. We don't want to change them. We don't want to reverse them, slow them down, accelerate them. What we are doing in the report, it's a stock-taking exercise. We observe them and we take them into consideration to anticipate the impacts. And what is our objective with that? The objective of the whole report is to equip us with the best possible tools to provide new solutions and to support people through change. So that's the real objective of this report. And so I will not go through all these trends here. It would take too much time. But the only thing I wanted to say is that COVID-19 has clearly demonstrated an extremely strong link between the demographic structures, or the trends, as we call them here, and the propagation of the virus, or the speed of the recovery. So you may know that this report was to be published already back in March, actually end of March, beginning of April, which was in the middle of the most acute phase of the pandemic. And we intentionally decided to postpone it, first to deal obviously with the most pressing issues, but then to see the impact of COVID, the impact that COVID has on demography, and to translate it, to incorporate it into the report. And rather than observing the impact of COVID on demography, what became very obvious very quickly during the crisis is the impact of demography on COVID. Because as a matter of fact, the demography has been far from neutral in the COVID pandemic. And it is not irrelevant whether your population is old, or if you live in a highly population concentrated urban areas, or in very low concentration rural areas. It is also not irrelevant if you live in a single person household, or in a household with many generations living together when it comes to social distancing. So all this to say that the drivers or the demographic picture we had as a point of departure is there to anticipate the possible impacts we will have. Now I come to almost the last slide, which are the impacts. So this is really the core subject of our report. I have really oversimplified it on this slide, just to give you a very quick overview of what we did. We divided those impacts into 4 different categories. The first one is obviously for us in the Commission, because how we are looking into it, and this is what you need to also to understand in light of what Mr. Bassi said in the beginning, is that we are looking into it on the level of the competencies of the Union. So obviously the competencies on the Union according to the treaties are much higher on this level than on the family policies. So first of all, the impact is on the labor market, because the first consequence of the shrinking workforce that we have are obviously the gaps that we have on the labor market. So what we need is a larger and a much more inclusive labor market. And I hope that we managed in the report to demonstrate how we need to draw on all its strengths and all the talents and all the diversity that we have. Some interpretations have been that the way we are drawing on the strengths is that we are responding to this challenge by immigration. And not at all. We're actually looking into all possibilities to fill in the gaps on the labor market. Immigration is one of the elements, but it's only one of the elements. And even when we speak about immigration, we're not speaking about humanitarian immigration. We're speaking about highly skilled workforce and workers. So the other important thing that we point out is the need to find ways to maintain productivity and growth. And I heard you, Mr. Bassi, in the beginning, but this is a key element if we want to make sure that Europeans continue to enjoy good and sustainable lives. And here, obviously, the role played by skills, by education, is crucial. So now I quickly go to the second category of impact, and this is health and long-term care. And here I think that COVID has demonstrated to us in a couple of very tragic and unfortunately stressful weeks, the étendue of disaster that we face if we don't have resilient health and care systems. So what we highlight in the report is the challenge of this growing burden of chronic diseases with an aging population, but also shortages of professional staff. As well as the need to meet the growing demand for accessible, good quality care services. The third topic are the public budgets and the impact of the public budgets. And here again, to simplify it to the extreme, the older Europe with a smaller workforce is likely to obviously increase pressure on public budgets. So the report highlights the fact that Europe will face a major challenge in funding its age-related spending in a way that is fair across generations. And this is what we need to ensure. And so finally, the impact on the regional dimension. And here I hope that we managed in the report to demonstrate that different regions are affected differently. So now the last slide, I come to the conclusions. We are publishing this report we published this report in a very specific context and very special circumstances. So the virus has really tested us and our health and care systems to the maximum. And it has demonstrated the link between the demographic structures on one side, like Marco said, and the impacts on the recovery potential. But the value of this text goes beyond these particular circumstances, because it is a stock-taking exercise of the intelligence we have at the moment which represents the basis of our further work on demography with this new portfolio that we have in the Commission with Vice President Šuica in charge of it. And I repeat, it is not about reversing or changing trends. It's really about equipping ourselves with the best possible tools that we may have, the right tools to provide the solutions that are needed and the right tools to support people through this change. And this is where we become operational with the next steps, with the green paper, with the long-term vision, with the children's strategy, with the child guarantee, and all the other initiatives that will take shape as a consequence of this report. So I'll stop here, first to hear your comments, and then because I'm really curious actually to hear the other two presentations from the European Parliament. And in this context, I wanted to thank for the letter that has been sent both by Carlo Ressler and Marco Zullo to the European Commission on behalf of the Parliament Intergroup on Demographic Challenges. And I see that Carlo will have the presentation on money, where the Parliament has obviously a lot to say. not only in the context of the MFF, but mainly in the context of finalizing the fund-specific regulations and earmarking amounts for demography that may help to further avoid population decline, which affects some regions really disproportionately to the point of handicapping their development. So thank you very much. I really hope I'm actually happy that the report has triggered the reflection on many different areas, and I'm looking forward for the cooperation with you in relation to children and family, because this was the point of the report. It's a starting point to make something great within the next years. So thank you very much, and I don't know how to give you back the screen, but I guess you will know.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing this very useful presentation and information for everybody. We have shared the link to the report of the European Commission on the chat, so people who are asking can consult it directly on the chat. And thank you very much, Deja, for this intervention. I fully agree with you. I don't really like this way of discussing. Also, it's much more difficult to exchange and to see the reaction in the faces of the people. And we completely agree that this is a starting point. That's why I think this webinar here it comes at the good moment, the end of the Croatian presidency, and it's only the start. So thank you very much. And I will give the floor to MEP, member of the European Parliament, Marco Zullo, who is the co-chair of the Intergroup on Demographic Challenges. So that's the intergroup which is really focused on these issues. So we are very happy for your presence here, for your virtual presence. Thank you very much.
So good morning to everybody, and thank you for this invitation. Before starting, I want to thank Vincenzo Bassi and FAFCE for involving me in this panel, and Nicola Speranza and Benedict Collin for organizing this important initiative. I'm really happy to share this virtual table with the colleague Carlo Resler, with whom I have the chance to cooperate in the framework of our intergroup on demographic challenges, family work balance, and young transitions. It has been really interesting to listen to the Croatian presidency, who during the last semester decided to deal with the demographic challenges as one of its priorities and made important step forward in this field. As a co-chair of the intergroup, I had loved to develop a closer cooperation with the Croatian presidency, and I really hope that we'll be able to cooperate more actively with the Council and the next presidencies. I'm very happy also to take the floor after the cabinet of the Vice President for Demography and Democracy. The fact that the new Commission entails Vice President charged with the demography is a really important message about the relevance of demography policies for the whole European Union. And indeed, as Vincenzo Bassi recently said, family is not anymore a divisive theme, but instead is a topic that unites. Demography challenges should unite more and more members with different political background, member states, and EU institutions. Demography and family are topics that unite in the interest of the European citizen now and especially for the next generation. Speaking about my country, Italy, I look with the interest that the government approved the so-called Family Act. First of all, Italy has a really worrying growing rate. So this act is an important sign of growing awareness on demographic challenges. Secondly, for the first time, the narrative around family is a positive one. Family is described as an asset for the country and not as a problem to be addressed. Family is a source of benefit for the Italian community, an important tool on which to invest in the perspective not just of preventing poverty, but to create a sustainable and happy society for all. So the so-called Italian Family Act, unfortunately, at the moment is nothing more than a proposal coming from the government and addressed to the parliament. Only if and when the Italian parliament will deal with this proposal and will approve it, the government will be enabled to develop the family policies envisaged in the Family Act. But this could take years. Also, this could never happen. So we know, even if these are very complicated months for the parliaments around Europe, because they are called to focus on the impressive challenges implied by the pandemic. Afterwards, the Italian Parliament will be called to deal with the national budget and with all the relevant files have been before suspended due to the COVID crisis. In this context, there is a concrete risk that the project of law for a Family Act could be treated as less important or as not a priority file. So this is have to be avoided because we cannot lose this opportunity. For this reason, I warmly invite the FAFCE, together with the Italian member Forum Nazionale delle Famiglie and civil society at all, in general, to keep on monitoring Italian institutions and continuing to stress to them that demography and the family are a priority. Instead, at European level, the European Council conclusion on demography changes are a welcoming sign that demographic changes must become a top priority of the European agenda. In a recent press release used by the intergroup, we welcomed the text when encouraging the investment in children as the form of social investment that pays the highest return in the future. In the same way, the European Economic and Social Committees stressed that the investment in efficient public service, along with family-oriented investment, should be a priority because they are laying the groundwork for the future. On this basis, we welcome the conclusion call. One, for target European funding for the member state and all the situation most affected by population decline. Second, for the fight against child poverty, and third, for coordinate policies that provide different kind of financial and other support for families. All this in the perspective of intergenerational solidarity. At the end, especially in this emergency situation that ugly impacted on families, it's of the utmost importance that the EU shapes its policies and its budget in such a way to create the condition for European families to have the children they wish and to enjoy a better quality of life. Live in safety and achieve balance between work, family, and caring responsibilities. So, thank you very much. I remain at your disposal to keep on supporting your effort in Italy and in Europe, together with the other colleagues of the intergroup on demographic changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Zurlo, for your intervention and also for your availability, for your work. Let's hope also for Italy that, and not only for Italy, for all European countries, this new priority given to the demographic challenges will put the right pressure on the member states to share best practices and to build real family policies for the future of Europe. And saying that, speaking about the future, I'm happy to give the floor to the member of the European Parliament, Carlo Ressler, who is also the Vice President of the Youth Organization of the EPP, and is the Vice Chair of the Intergroup on Demographic Challenges as well. And I think that here, also with the title of his presentation, he also speaks as a member of the Budgets Committee. And as Deja told before from the European Commission, the European Parliament has a very important role when it comes to building the budget for Europe. So thank you very much for your presence among us. I know that it's not easy due to the political activity in Croatia, but I'm happy to give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, really, for the invitation, but also for this kind introduction. I would also obviously prefer that we were able to meet in person and to discuss it in a more natural environment, but it is understandable that unfortunately during the global pandemic this is not obviously possible. But it was also understandable that due to the unprecedented situation in which the EU also found itself, the issue of really tackling the virus, but also the negative economic consequences of the pandemic were the biggest priority of the EU. But at the same time, demographic changes remained one of the most important European problems and challenges, but even more, the pandemic really amplified some of the aspects, as it was shown in the report on the impact of the demographic changes in Europe. For this reason, with the other colleagues from the intergroup, we decided to write to the Commission regarding this crucial issue, and I would really like to mention only some of the few concrete examples of these links between the health situation and also the demographic challenges. So first of all, it is evident that elderly people have been and I mean still are at far greater risk than the rest of the general population, and unfortunately nursing homes all around Europe were in the spotlight of this tragedy. And besides that, distancing measures have been more difficult to maintain in urban than in rural areas, since the population concentration had been an important factor in the spread of the virus, but also the quality of healthcare has often been unequal in more remote areas. At the same time, once again, European families have proven as a fundamental shelter against poverty and against social exclusion, especially towards children and when schools have been closed, but also towards elderly in helping them staying safe and at home. But unfortunately, this is not all. Also, the economic uncertainty that follows will strongly influence European families, and especially the capacity of many young couples to really build their families. And this will be especially evident in the further and more marginalized areas in Europe, including islands, and even in the places where this was a problem even before the pandemic, this will certainly have even stronger and long-lasting negative economic effects. Therefore, we asked the Commission also to take account of all those challenges, but also to really insist on what has been doing in the past year, and that's why I really see also this webinar as a stock-taking exercise, not only in the report on the impact of the demographic changes, but also in terms of really taking a look at where we stand now, a year after the European elections and after the beginning of the new institutional cycle, and also of the new European Commission and of the newly established portfolio for the demographic change. I'm pleased to say that in the meantime, also besides that the report was published, we received the reply from the Vice President Šuica, and I really hope that the Commission will continue with this path on really developing a comprehensive demographic policy of the EU, obviously within the legal competences. Regarding the budget and the connection of the budgetary issues with the demographic change and in ways of addressing it, for me, it is really challenging to think about really tackling these deep demographic changes without budget, without the European funds as really the most comprehensive, but also the most effective way in which many other European policies are really addressed. And in that sense, I believe that it is crucial to mention Article 174 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, which clearly stipulates not only the need for social, economic, and territorial cohesion, but also the need to really reduce the disparities between the different European member states and also European regions. And in particular, it explicitly emphasized that it is crucial to pay particular special attention to regions that suffer from severe and permanent natural or demographic handicaps. In this sense, for me, it is really important to use this mandate and to use the following 4 years in order to really find the concrete and more specific ways in which it is possible to really make this article, clear article, even more concrete and more founded in the European policies, and most especially in the budget of the European Union. As a reporter for the EPP for the budget of the next year, I would like to really at least briefly mention also the political guidelines of the budget, which were adopted at the plenary session in the European Parliament last week. And besides many different aspects, and besides the main aim of really making European recovery and helping its citizens in reverting the negative economic effects, the guidelines also underline the importance of addressing long-term structural demographic changes, and especially to address the aging populations. And in that sense, I really think that after this stock-taking exercise, it is really crucial to try to include all those elements in really every budgetary line. And in that sense, it it is probably the first step to look at the cohesion policy, to try to include it in this part, but also the European Social Fund, education, youth unemployment. All these aspects are really important and are closely connected or even intertwined with the demographic trends. So as I can see that we are really a bit behind the schedule, I'll really try to sum it up briefly. For me, it is evident that demographic change is finally recognized as an issue that is really of a concern for the whole continent and for the EU. By tackling the demographic changes, we are not tackling really independent social parameters, but we are really tackling aging population, families, economies. All this is really closely connected. A huge step was done by the Commission when it introduced a new portfolio on demographic change. In order to support the different groups, this report on the impact of the demographic change is really a good starting point. It is also closely linked with the conference on the future of Europe, and I really hope that it will be addressed within this format as well. The Croatian presidency has undoubtedly also gave its contribution to, first of all, including the topic in the strategic agenda even before our presidency started, but also by trying to have this topic high on the agenda of the EU. Also, what we are trying to achieve within the European Parliament and try to have that vital role is also the establishment, as we already heard, of the intergroup on demographic challenges, work-life balance, and youth transition as a cross-party group of like-minded MEPs from various member states. And we all face consequences of demographic change, although they are different in different countries. And I really hope that we will use that unique experience from different parts of Europe, but also to use our positions within the different diverse EU institutions to really make sure that we are entering into a new phase of dealing with the demographic challenges in the EU.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very concrete presentation with all your concrete proposals to go ahead. Listening to you, I was thinking there is really a lot of work to do together to build this community. How our president was talking about the beginning. I'm really happy of this exchange. I'm really sorry that we cannot we say goodbye to Deja Stress and who has to leave us. I'm very sorry that we cannot have a longer exchange, because I'm sure that there are many good ideas, many good points. Here we're speaking really about concrete problems of people, of families, and what Carol Ressler said about the family as a shelter. It echoes also what we have declared. Our president said that this crisis has unveiled the family as the rock of people's life. So we thank you very much for your attention. I have to say also that a member of the European Parliament, Mrs. Rafalska, was supposed to be among us, but due to her commitments, she was not able to connect this afternoon. But we are in touch with her also because she's in charge of an important report on the demographic challenges in the European Parliament. My colleague Bénédicte Collin has been sharing some useful links during this webinar. The last were about the Council conclusions, but also about an overview that we give on our website of all European institutions' proposals on the demographic challenges. And it's to her, before concluding this meeting, that I would like to give the last word to wrap up all what we have been saying.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will try to be very brief as we are running out of time. Thank you very much for attending. I would like to thank again all the speakers for their very insightful contribution. And quickly, as our president stressed, sustainable development and recovery will only be possible if we have intergenerational solidarity. And in order to have solidarity between generations, you need balance, which can only be obtained through family-friendly policies and seeing family as an investment for society and putting family and the person at the center. Thank you as well to Mr. Vida Kušić for his presentation of the Council conclusions on demographic challenges and reminding us that all EU member states are facing different demographic challenges, and we need to have a comprehensive approach and to insist on demographic challenges in all EU policy. Thank you very much for Mrs. Resan, even though she had to leave, for her very precise presentation of the report the Commission just published on demographic challenges. Thank you very much to the Member of Parliament, Mr. Zullo and Mr. Rester, for working to put demographic challenges as a priority within the European Parliament, with their work within the intergroup on demographic challenges. Thank you for stressing that family is an asset for society, and that the crisis and the pandemic increased the disparities between regions, and it's a question of EU competence to work to reduce those disparities. To conclude, 2 more points. As on Tuesday was held the tripartite social summit, and the Croatian Prime Minister reminded that Europe will only have a sustainable recovery if we have solidarity and unity, and a unity that will benefit all EU citizens, especially the most vulnerable. And with regard to most vulnerable people, we are working on demographic challenges, but especially on the role of elderly persons, and not only the care for them, but their role for family, solidarity, and society. We are working with the COMESE, the Conference of Bishops Conference, to the EU on ad hoc working group to draft documents that we hope will contribute to the Green Paper on Aging the European Commission is working on for next year, 2021. So we hope to continue this work to really put demographic challenges as the top of the European agenda. And thank you everyone for participating, for listening, for speaking. We do apologize that we don't have any time for questions, but you can send us any of the questions to the speaker. We will give them to them and hope to have an answer. So thank you very much to everyone. I hope you will have a good afternoon, and it's as sunny as it is in Brussels. So yeah, thank you very much to everyone.